Hello and welcome to the Power Fish Podcast. I'm Fish.
And I'm Ben. I wanted to share my experience so far with meditation. We've talked about this in the past and how I heard a little tidbit from Mr. Sam Harris on what it's like to be an adept meditator. And I was just vastly fascinated, not only by the correlation and similarity that he linked it to in regards to the effects of psychedelics and how those are very similar, but also in how, what was it he said? Like the detachment of self from conscious thought, and how I thought that was something that I wanted and very fascinating. Well, I have, for the last week or so, I finally started. I've tried meditating. Now, I don't want to overstate my experience here because I would say total meditation time, maybe like an hour total. It's only been about 10 minutes a day. So just absolutely super limited. But already I can just have cracked open the door of potential. So there is a little bit to talk about. So first things first, it's tough. It is so... You'd think just sitting down and doing a whole lot of nothing is what's the worst that can happen other than just be boring? But no, it's genuinely actually difficult. And I guess this isn't that surprising because when you and I talked about it however many episodes back, we talked about how it is. We're similar in so much that it's hard for us to sort of lose our perception of space and time around us, even in something akin to a flow state, like if we're playing a video game that we're really into, or for some people it happens when they're editing, or just working in general. Even then, it is difficult for me to lose track of the space around me and the passing of time. So this has been just absolutely tough. So the goal is, of course, you want to be... See, before I started this, I would have said the goal is to get into a thoughtless flow state. And that's kind of true. But being absent of thought isn't really the goal here. It's focusing all thought on one thing, sort of. So a lot of people use the breath, just the inhale and the exhale, as something to focus on. And that's, at least for the first 10 to 20 minutes, what I was doing, or just trying to do at the very least, because it is tough to focus on one thing. As soon as you thoughts, it becomes super, super, super apparent that you have zero control over what enters consciousness.
Right.
It becomes as clear as day when there is nothing else to focus on but consciousness. So when a thought enters, whether that's, like what you're gonna freaking eat, that your knee itches, that a bird outside is chirping, a conversation 15 years ago, whatever it is, when it enters, the goal is to try and realize it the very moment that it enters consciousness, and observe it, realize it, know that it entered, rather than it entering and being a thought that you associate with yourself.
Yeah.
that's really hard. Sometimes I am thinking about stuff for 2-3 minutes before I realize that I'm thinking about stuff, because it's so closely associated with me, myself. And it's hard to separate myself from that and realize that these are thoughts that I clearly have absolutely zero control of what is being popped up in consciousness here. So just absolutely, it's so tough to focus on one thing and observe a thought as it enters. But it gets easier. It gets easier. Like, this was nearly impossible for the first 3 days. But as I have tried it more, and this is only in the last 2 or 3 days that I feel like I've actually gotten anything out of this. Eventually, one thing I noticed as I just kept trying to focus on the breath, focus on just one thing at a time. It doesn't have to be the breath. It could be a sensation in your body. It could be a feeling that you have. It could be something external to yourself. It could be a hum of the refrigerator. It could be anything. Just as long as all attention is not everywhere all at once, and instead just focused a laser on one thing. As I focused on the breath over the last couple of days, I realized that when I started to hear things, when things started to, because not only can I not decide what enters consciousness from within my own brain, but I also can't decide what enters consciousness through my ears too. When I hear something and I'm conscious of that sound, I don't have the free will to not let that enter my consciousness. Sound is going to get in whether you like it or not. So, but like I said, the point isn't to eliminate thoughts from consciousness. It's to simply just recognize them. So hearing the sounds around you is part of that. You're not trying to block out things around you. There's no such thing as a distracting environment when it comes to meditation, because your environment is simply just another thing that you can focus on. One sound in your environment.
Interesting.
Even if it's a jackhammer. So I noticed as I observed the sound around me, as I recognized entering noises in consciousness, and doing everything I could to focus on just the one thing I'm trying to listen to, you realize how much there is to hear. Every day we go through life and we hear 1,000 sounds all at once, and most of it gets blocked out on just, for whatever reason, we're focused on something else, whatever it would be. But I was sitting in my living room. I'll give an example of this. I was sitting in my living room and I was listening to simply the cars outside driving by. And that doesn't sound particularly exciting. But as time went on, I realized that I can hear, as the car is farther away and it gets closer to the house and then goes away again, I can hear the wind, like a plane flying through the sky. You can hear the wind being pushed out of the way. You can hear things that you never thought you could hear, that you never tried to hear. And that doesn't sound very profound, but in the moment, it's it's very hard to describe. It's very hard to explain. It feels much more profound when you've heard something a million times, but you're hearing it again like it's the first time you've ever heard it. It's and you're recognizing all that there is to hear and all the things that just through normal life haven't been paying attention to. And another example is also in the living room was the cat drinks out of a water thing, but it's kind of like a water fountain, so it like filters through its own water and it keeps coming out the top, and it's one of those infinite cycle things.
Right. Yeah.
I focused on that, and it's like I could hear every single ripple of water, and I could hear the motor inside of it pulling water up the tube to get back to the top. It's so super, and this is, like I said, this is an hour, about 10 minutes a day. So there's hardly anything profound about what I'm saying here, but in the moment, it feels deeply profound for some reason. You're just here. It's like I said, it's like you're hearing things that you've always had the information. Like, it's not like these sounds don't exist when you're just living and walking by normal life. They do exist, but for some reason, I've just never heard them until now. And that's really, it's weird that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I have no experience with meditation, really. I mean, when we talked about this the last time, I remember mentioning how in a moment of contemplation, I can stop and analyze a thought. But that's not meditation. That's
realizing you just thunk a thought is itself a thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so, that's more just introspection in general.
Right. Introspection it's not quite the same thing as meditation. And I will say, I'm not even remotely close to the point of being able to completely detach myself from something entering consciousness and being able to analyze it objectively and the feelings that it subsequently permeates throughout me as if it's somebody else. Like, I am nowhere even remotely close to that point, and maybe I never will be, but it's certainly a thing. Like, I usually, just from more adept meditators, I do hear that is often discovered on like a 5-day meditation retreat where you are literally doing nothing else. So like,
it sounds rough.
That's the thing. It sounds rough, but when you're actually an adept meditator,
well, yeah, it'd be normal. You'd know what you're expecting. Yeah.
Exactly. It's a normal week. This is an exciting time. Like
you're looking forward to your meditative time. Right.
But for someone at my state right now, that feels like, holy crap, that I'm going to be bored out of my life. But that's not the point. And that's something you can focus on. If you can't stop yourself trying to meditate, if you can't stop yourself from realizing how bored you are and the feeling that ensues is itself something that you can direct focus towards. So,
gotcha.
There is truly an unlimited amount of things that can be, for want of a better term, meditated on. So,
right.
Yeah. So I strive. Yeah. I really want one day to get to the point of being able to just not, what am I trying to say here? Like, intellectually, I know that my consciousness is not myself. Like I know, especially after even just meditating for an hour, it is abundantly clear that I have zero control over what enters my consciousness, over what thoughts come up. But it's simply just that. It's an intellectual knowledge. I don't feel like that's the case. I feel like when I think, it feels like I'm the one deciding to think what I'm thinking.
Right.
So maybe one day I will get to the point of, being able to analyze thoughts in a more objective way, simply for what they are, and realize that they really have nothing to do with me. But that's tough. That's a tough thing. That's actually a pretty that's one of the main sort of tenets, I guess you could say, of Buddhism. The Buddha actually he went around sort of preaching, quote unquote, not self, as it's said, or the lack of the existence of a self. No, the self being non-existent or not existing is a pretty big thing in Buddhism. And getting to the point of deeply actually feeling that is apparently a pretty big milestone. But
is it more along the lines of you as yourself is not a stable definition, but you are an amalgamation of passing elements in your life? Is that what we're getting at?
Kind of. Well, if you ask the Buddha and many other adept meditators that kind of follow Buddhist tradition, they would say the self simply does not exist. There is no self. Sam Harris says that same thing. I think when they say the self, they are talking about a soul, and if that's what they're talking about, I would agree. Because when people refer to the self, typically they mean something that persists from birth to death, and for some even past death. It's a thing that makes you from the moment you're born, and is persisting and is the same until old age, until you die and beyond.
Right.
But when you actually get down to the things that make up what a human being is, your mind, like consciousness, is that something that is ever changing? Absolutely. Your body is obviously ever changing. Everything, there's nothing about us that is not just constantly changing. There is nothing that is persistent from birth to death. So that's where the question of, okay, then surely a self doesn't exist then comes in. And to that notion, again, assuming the self is a sort of metaphysical self, a hand-wavy woo-woo soul, I would agree. But if we're just talking about the self as the conglomerate of my consciousness in combination with my mind, in combination with my body, sure, I'll say that's me.
Right. But yeah, I think the point, again, I don't meditate, but I'm gathering that the point is the thoughts that pass through don't originate from yourself. It's more of a prompting from your environment, I suppose.
Right. They come from God knows where, and you don't get to decide how long they stay. You don't get to decide what gets in there. But the way we act out is almost 100% dependent upon what gets in there. So it can only be a good thing to recognize that the things that get in there aren't always what you should be associating with yourself and acting out on.
So I don't meditate, like I said. The closest I think I've ever come to meditation is going to sleep. So I have a lot of trouble sleeping.
Yeah. It kind of feels like that. Yeah.
I have a lot of trouble sleeping, and the reason for that is because I have many intrusive thoughts trying to sleep, and not all bad. Just I will just be laying there trying to sleep, trying to relax, and then all of a sudden I'm thinking about something, and then I'm thinking about it for an hour.
Right. Yeah.
So
you just described a billion people's experience of trying to go to sleep.
Right. So part of the sleeping process for me on some nights are better than others, but on some nights is get as comfortable as possible, not eliminate distractions, but get myself in a mindset where it becomes a little bit easier. And then a lot of times it's focusing on breath. Sometimes it is like, because we have fans running, it is focusing on
that's
the fan.
Sorry to quick tangent here, but that is a huge thing with fans is the noise. It allows the brain to focus on less things, on one thing. There's the noise.
Nothing. It's ironic for me, but as far as trying to go to sleep and quote unquote meditation in this particular aspect, there is nothing more distracting to me than a completely quiet room. Like for me, that is an environment that I can't relax in, and I don't know why. But that is just part of it.
Meditate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in those moments, I focus on one thing, and it helps relax, and not consciously, but a lot of the intrusive thoughts quiet down, and it allows me to sleep. That is, I think, the closest I've been to meditation, and in a very non-formal sense.
Yeah, I for in the last, yesterday, I'd say this happened. Yesterday, when I was meditating, I would say I felt like I got something, like a split second of something good for a moment there, because for just a split second, it felt like I was kind of on a streak, right? I was on a streak of no thoughts entering consciousness, or at least not. There were still thoughts entering consciousness, but there weren't ones that were taking over and me not being able to realize that that's simply what just happened. So I was kind of on a streak, right? For a couple minutes of doing pretty good. And for just a split second, it felt like I entered kind of like a dream state.
Mm-hmm.
Like the things around me, I'm starting, like I said, the door is just slightly cracked. I'm starting to slightly be able to, maybe just based on that short, tiny little moment, I'm starting to maybe understand why it is so impossibly hard to explain things like psychedelics and deep meditation. Because this is really hard to explain for just a short second. It's kind of like I was in a dream state.
So explain a dream state, right? So you're meditating, focusing on one aspect, right? Mm-hmm. And you enter a dream state. What is happening? What is obviously we're trying to be absent of thought. Is there a thought?
Well, no, you're not trying to be absent of thought. You're just trying not to allow the thought to enter unnoticed.
Yeah, that's what I mean by what I mean by that.
Yeah. You're not trying to let thought enter unnoticed. So yeah.
If you're in a dream state, right, or a flow state, or whatever you'd want to call that, I guess expound upon that. I'm interested to see what that would...
Dude, I was trying, is the thing. It's like... And like I said, this was just only for a short moment. It felt like the sounds that I was hearing the car is passing by and the trickling of the water, the rumbling of the fridge, the jingling of the cat's freaking necklace. It all of them were noticed in consciousness, but they didn't feel how do I put this? They didn't feel like anything different in consciousness than a thought. If that makes any sense. Like they felt like they were part of me, part of my quote unquote me, part of my consciousness, the same way a thought would be. It didn't feel like they were something out there. And it felt extremely just kind of, I mean, it felt extremely comforting, but that doesn't really, that's not the right word. It's, I don't know.
So, okay, let me explain a scenario to you, and you tell me if this is similar or if I'm drawing a conclusion that I shouldn't be drawing. So, let's say you're in a relatively busy. What's a good example of what I'm talking about? Well, you never went to public school, but you can imagine. You can imagine this, like a busy, crowded lunchroom, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kids fucking screaming. There's all kinds of shit going on.
Yeah.
But you're focused on something. You're doing something, whether it be a task or I don't know, you're filling out something or whatever. And you recognize that there's stuff going on around you, but it's not that you're blocking it out. It's just kind of a part of what you're doing. I've had those experiences before.
Like a flow state.
Kind of.
Yeah. You recognize the sounds around you and you recognize the things happening around you, but it's not really. It's sort of one with what you're doing in a sense. And sort of.
It's not like I put on headphones and I can't hear them. That is an all-encompassing feature of what is happening in front of me.
Kind of, yeah. Except minus the activity that you're sort of doing, minus the writing down or the editing or whatever the hell you would be doing in a classroom. Minus that part, and kind of that's kind of what it was like for just an extremely short moment. Yeah.
Yeah, no, the reason I draw that comparison is because that's probably the idea of a flow state, the closest I can come to relating to that. Because I've never done this before. But in that particular aspect, I know what you're talking about how it's not about blocking out noises. It becomes one with yourself.
Yeah, everything that was in my consciousness felt like it was all one thing. Like I didn't associate the jingling of the cat's necklace with a cat running around out there jingling the necklace. It sounded like it was just sound. It was just unassociated with anything kind of, just along with everything else. And speaking of, that's actually, I don't think that's what happened here, but that actually is a pretty talked about thing in Buddhist tradition as well, is I think what they call it is essence, the detachment of essence from things. So typically when you hear something, let's say you're hearing a dog bark.
Yeah.
You know it's a dog barking, and you don't need to think twice to realize that. It is deeply ingrained within you that when you hear a dog barking, it's not, it is reflex to associate that with dog
Right.
barking.
Right.
So
What are you gonna associate it with, a cat? I mean,
exactly. But the thing is, or here, essence of dog is how they would say that, I think. You associate but dog barking with essence of dog barking. So but the dog's bark isn't communicating to you that it's a dog barking. All the dog's bark is ripples in the air, right? Sound waves. That's all it is. There's no information with those sound waves that indicate it's a dog. So the essence part of dog, the fact that it's a dog barking, is simply a construct of our own minds. It is us doing that, making that association, applying essence of dog to bark. So one thing taught in Buddhism is to detach essence from all things, including human beings. So when you see a guy that pulls out on the road, 20 feet in front of you and cuts you off, immediately, in the same way that you associate the dog with the bark, without thinking, immediately you associate essence of bad person to this person. Like it doesn't require any extra thought or any extra contemplation to associate this person with something not good.
Right.
And same for the other way around. If someone does a virtuous act, we associate them with a good person almost immediately. Like if someone, gave a homeless person money, just for example. So again, but these actions and these sounds, they don't carry the information of bad person, good person, dog, car. They don't carry the information of those things with the perception of them.
Right.
So when we see someone do something good, all we're seeing is, light waves. And the light certainly isn't carrying information in it that's telling us that. So being able to, like an airplane overhead, if you hear an airplane overhead, same scenario, it's an airplane. But if you detach the essence from the perception, you can hear an airplane as if like an alien civilization was here and has never heard an airplane before. Just anybody that's never heard an airplane in their lives would just be hearing the sound for what it is.
Right.
And not attaching any sort of essence to it. If you can do that with all things, this is kind of what they call, I think, this is what they're referring to in Buddhist tradition as emptiness. The world is empty, which sounds depressing. But when you explain it in a way that the world is detached from all the essence that your Ooga Booga mind associates to it, you can see just something like a tree for sort of the first time and recognize the beauty in leaves and the color and the veins that go through the leaves and the bark on trees. Like you're seeing one for the very first time, because you've detached the essence of tree. When you see a tree and you see another tree, all you have to do is attach essence of tree to realize, oh, that's just another tree, and not pay attention to it. Right?
Right. Okay.
So if you detach that association, you can see beauty where you otherwise couldn't have, because you attach essence of tree to a tree and just associate one with all the others because it's just a tree.
This all sounds to me like an extreme version of live in the moment. That's kind of what it sounds like to me. It's like,
Yeah, maybe.
because
Yeah.
people say live in the moment, they mean don't dwell on the past. But this is taking a step further to meaning don't think about how you've seen trees before.
Right. Don't
You
think
know?
about all the previous experiences of trees and just slap on essence of tree to this one and then just move on because you know it's a tree and you've seen trees before. Experience the tree for everything that it is. And it's yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I could imagine that would be very difficult.
Yeah.
Because I mean,
like I said, I have no even concept of even reaching that ever. One day I might, if I do this for who knows how long, but
and you can easily see through, I mean, just the way you've explained it, you can easily see the utility of this.
oh my gosh. Yeah.
You know, from a utility standpoint, especially when you brought up essence of bad driver in that example.
Yeah. Like you've seen bad drivers before. I'm just going to apply it to this bad driver because I know what bad drivers are. I know bad people when I see them.
And then the
you don't.
utility of this, right? The utility is you now don't have to have enter your consciousness negative thoughts. You can be detached.
You can detach yourself from the consequence of that thought arising because it's not going to not arise.
Yeah.
Like we already determined, you don't have control over what gets in there, but you do have the option to attach yourself to it.
Right. There's a very big difference. I'm gonna pick on my girlfriend for a little bit. So
that's good.
Road rage exists within her, and
a lot of people.
Road rage does not exist within me. Right. So we'll see somebody do something, and let's say she's driving, or it doesn't even really matter. But let's say she's driving. Something happens. Somebody cuts you off. Whatever. Pulls out in front of you. Anger immediately arises from her. And my initial reaction is you obviously react. And then the next thought is, okay, it's over. We'll just move on. Right. And there's no anger, but the anger stays. The anger permeates for a while because it's something that you can't control the visceral reaction and the association.
Right.
But I feel like if you were really good about capturing the anger and just letting it dissipate and not dwelling,
just observe it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't associate yourself with it. Just simply observe it and it will dissipate.
And I mean, we talked about this on the episode that we talked about this that we're referencing. I wish I knew which episode that was. But we talked about the utility of mental health and the ability to observe and allow to pass a negative self-thought or negative external thought or whatever it is. You can not eliminate, but you can finally decide for yourself what you want to focus on and what you don't. And if it's a negative thought about yourself, let's say, you can allow it to not be focused on.
Right. Yeah. There is I would say a lot of utility in that. Oh yeah, speaking of not being able to control things that enter consciousness, I heard this recently. The potentially the evolutionary utility of consciousness and why it could exist. Just a theory on that, or not even that, just a hypothesis on a potential evolutionary reason for consciousness. And if it is, this is hilarious. But it was convincing to me. It was too dilute. The existence of consciousness was to provide an illusion. And let me explain this. It is there to be in illusion. So, but possibly. If we know that consciousness is really, really good at post hoc rationalization of actions. We know that we are going to do, based on the book Determined from Robert Sapolsky, the actions we take the brain's neurons are firing to take those actions before the action of us deciding it is entered in consciousness.
Right.
So by about 200 milliseconds, things that we do, our brain knew they were going to do it about 200 milliseconds before our consciousness knew we were going to do it. So we quote unquote, like I said, the self, whatever that means. We don't decide the actions we take. And this is not new information. We've talked about free will, into the dirt. But given the lack of free will and the implication that our brain is basically controlling everything here before our consciousness even gets to know about it, we have to, in some scenarios, know why we do something. Because if we don't, if somebody, for social reasons, so we know we do have evolutionarily evolved traits socially. We know there is social reasons for why we have some of the things that we have. Consciousness could be one of them. If somebody asks you why you are doing an action, if you say, or if you have nothing to say, or if you say, I don't know, my brain is just deciding to do this, or I'm crazy, help me, or whatever, then we're obviously not going to be looked at as a mate potential.
Okay.
If that makes sense, right?
No, I'm following. Yeah. Okay.
So given that there is utility in knowing why we do something, our brain has to pop something into our consciousness as a reason for why we're doing something, to portray ourselves as, someone that's competent, someone that knows what they're doing, a leader, and name all these things. But oftentimes it's an illusion, the things that we're saying. So there is proof of, there's not proof that this is why consciousness exists. Certainly not. This is just the hypothesis. But there is proof that we will come up with reasons for things that are a delusion. The fact that our actions are committed to in the brain 200 milliseconds before our consciousness ever gets to know about them is itself a reality of that. But a more stark, easy to grasp reality of that is split brain patients, when the corpus callosum is separated from the left and right hemisphere. There was, I'm gonna struggle thinking about this example, but there was one patient who their corpus callosum was separated, and they were shown an image, and both hemispheres of the brain can see stuff, I think. One hemisphere has control of speech, another one has control of like hand movements. Mm-hmm. So an image was shown, or maybe I'm butchering this to no end, but I might have to just make up some stuff to get the point of the experiment across. But I think what had happened was there was an image shown of a nut, and okay, maybe I lied about both being able to see. I think what it is one hemisphere can see things and another hemisphere can hear or something like that. And there was an image of a nut, but something else was said. Like, I think it was like toy or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the image that was seen by the person, the speaking side of the brain was also the seeing side of the brain. The image was shown to the person, and the person had to explain the image, and the hand was told something else. The hand had to rummage through a bin of things and grab the thing that was spoken, right?
Okay.
So if I think it was like toy, if toy was spoken, then the hand would rummage through something and grab a toy. But an image was shown, and the guy would have to explain the image. And this, the seeing, speaking mind has no way to communicate with what the hell the hand is doing, right? It has no way to, because the thing that does that is completely separated. So the guy that, the guy doesn't even know he's being told things. The hand does, but the seeing guy doesn't. The seeing, speaking guy doesn't.
Right.
Okay. So he sees an image. He's told to explain the image. At the same time, the hand is being told to get a toy out of a bin. So once the hand grabs a toy out of the bin, the man is asked to explain the image and then explain why he's holding this toy. And without skipping a beat, the guy explained why he's holding the toy and how it relates to the image that he saw, even though he has zero control over the reason why that toy was actually picked up and doesn't even know that he was told to pick up a toy, but the hand does. So consciousness created a reason and stitched it to this explanation of an image. It created a reason for this action that he, in reality, has no idea why he did. But he thought he did do it. He thought he did have an idea of why he did it because consciousness made up an illusion on why he did it. So even with split brain patients, the hemisphere that doesn't get the consciousness, whatever that means, can do things. And the conscious part of the brain is going to make up a reason as to why it did that, even though it really has no idea why. So
okay,
that is a pretty big example on how consciousness creates reasons that are illusions that can be just completely incorrect, but feel correct to us because our consciousness is all we have when it comes to something like a reason we're doing something. And if that's not reason enough, we just see in everyday life that consciousness is, people are living life diluted. So there's been studies on this. I'm sure you've heard examples of people rating their driving skills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So everyone thinks they're way better than they are. Everybody, almost everybody. So there was an example, 50 people were grabbed, right? 50 people, they gave them a scale. Expert level was the very top. Mm-hmm. They asked all 50 where they would put themselves on this scale from, bad, average, expert. All of them, all 50 said near expert level driving skills. Here's the thing. That's not even the wacky part. The 50 people that they grabbed were all people that had been in a wreck in the last 6 months. And 2/3 of them were at fault for that wreck.
Good Lord.
So if that obviously is consciousness giving them a completely delusional reason, because consciousness' job is to make us portray ourselves as someone that has value, someone that has mate value, someone that can copulate, you know?
Yeah.
So again, this is all just a hypothesis as to how consciousness could maybe exist evolutionarily. That does not explain why we have no idea. Like everything else when it comes to evolution, we can point to in a microscope, right? Consciousness is not one of them. So that's still completely unexplained. But, you know, if it was something that came about through evolution, that could be a reason why, is simply to dilute us, to be an illusion, to portray ourselves in our own minds as having reasons for doing things that we actually have no idea why we're doing because we're not the drivers, our brains are, and portraying ourselves as something with higher mate value than basically portraying ourselves as the good guy and them as the bad guy and stuff like that. It's really difficult for someone to see themselves as truly, you know, the bad person, so to speak.
That is really interesting. I I guess I'd be curious to know how that, and there's I'm sure no answer for this, but how that starts, why that starts, why that evolutionary trait
Yeah, I
picks
have
up in the first place.
right.
You know?
That's something I would have no idea. Like we know evolution doesn't, you know, it's not a mind. All it is random mutation plus natural selection. So what kind of random mutation? That's the problem. Is consciousness isn't reducible, right? It's either someone has it or they don't, as far as we can tell.
Right.
And evolution doesn't work in you know, creating something that in whole that otherwise wasn't there from the previous generation. It's literally one gene at a time. It's a genetic mutation. It's extremely long over the time. And there's no like way to tell if like consciousness was this thing that we kind of had, that some people with this gene mutation had, and because they had enough of it to portray themselves as a higher mate value, they got to mate more, you know, thus making more kids with this tiny little bit of consciousness. It's hard. I don't know, because it's not reducible. So like, we can't look at it under a microscope like we can with literally everything else in the human body.
So we know that animals they don't have the words to explain their actions. But would this hypothesis mean that animals can't think through their actions? Like other animals, I mean, non-humans?
As in like have consciousness.
Well, I
Well,
mean,
that's
not in that formal of a way, but just right, macro lens here. We're talking about consciousness is or consciousness developed as a way to be able to explain our actions for the purpose of procreation.
mhm.
Does that imply that other animals can't, should they have the ability to communicate?
Can't what? Can't have consciousness?
Can't, no, can't reason through actions.
Hmm.
Because
Well,
we can't, I mean, I can't go ask my cat why they do the annoying things that they do.
yeah, they're
But
not going to answer you.
they get not going to answer. But could they? Should they have the ability to speak?
Well, they would have to have some level of consciousness to create a reason as to why they're doing something.
Right, but that's my question. Is again, let's assume a magical universe where for some
Let's say we
reason,
strap a cat translation
yeah,
necklace.
yeah, yeah.
If
Could
we
they do
asked
that?
them,
That'd be my question.
If we spoke and that it translated English to cat and vice versa.
Yeah.
Wow, that's such a interesting thing. Would they even, because one thing you have to be able to understand language is, well, I was about to say you have to have consciousness to understand grammatical language, but every species has its way of communicating.
Right. There is some form of probably rudimentary, but rudimentary communication in.
Right. It's not complex language, but so that would beg the question, could a human understand, would humans need, could a human without consciousness understand complex language? Because here's the thing, we understand grammar without it entering consciousness to be able to spit words. We don't think about grammar and the order of words.
Yeah, but you have to learn it.
Exactly. You have to be able to learn it, but you can also teach animals things as well, not to the level of, full on a language.
I think
But
the distinction is with let's say you have a chimpanzee or something and you teach sign language. That's just more association. And not but if you're associating, then unless the signs that they make are meaningless, which they clearly are not meaningless.
Right, they're not meaningless.
Because you could say, like, I don't know, I've not seen a lot of studies with this, but I know that you can teach a monkey that this is this thing is red, and then this is blue, and this is yellow, and then you say, what's this one? And then they'll go, if you point to the yellow one, they'll go yellow. Like they know this thing means that.
Right.
And that is a level of awareness of knowing what you're doing to communicate something. Same thing with, like, you've seen the dogs and cats, they have little buttons that you can put down on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
They want to, the action is indicating something.
Right. They can make associations, I think
but is that consciousness?
Yeah, that's the thing. Is this that sort of low level developmental consciousness in early evolution? I don't know.
Because that's how humans start. You don't boop out of the womb knowing I'm going to do this thing for this goal, and this is my hierarchy chain of actions. You say, thing. I do thing, and thing happens.
That's the thing, though. We can make much more complex associations. And beyond association, we can learn grammar, but we also have, is that because of consciousness, or is that because we have the biggest freaking brains to body size in the entire animal universe?
Is that true? I actually don't know.
Yeah. The only thing with a bigger brain is, there are things with bigger brains, but they have enormously bigger bodies that take up a lot of that brain power. Oh, what was it? Like a whale or something? Or like a mammoth?
Sperm whale, potentially.
An elephant. I think elephants have bigger brains than us.
Which animal has the largest brain relative to its body size? Wow, don't just tell me the answer. That'd be great.
I mean, it might.
Ooh, there's a whole Wikipedia brain body mass ratio.
Brain body mass ratio. That's getting to what we're trying to get at here.
So, like, as an example, a small ant is 1 to 7. 1 brain for 7 body, right?
1 to 7 brain to body.
Where's human?
Oh, we like 1 over.
Oh, humans
5 or something?
1 to 40.
1 brain size to
body mass. Yeah.
To body mass size. Okay.
1 to 40. A moose is also 1 to 40.
So, but how big are the brains, though?
Well, in the case of an ant, pretty freaking small.
Right. It's dinky.
But also,
there ain't a lot of processing happening in that thing.
Something called Something called an elephant fish is 1 to 32. What is that? I don't even know what that is.
An elephant fish?
An elephant fish.
Is there anything that has brains as big as us that has almost the same sized body as us?
So, okay, is that the...
Because I'm sure there's things that have a brain that's almost the entire size of their body, but it doesn't mean anything if the brain is the size of a pea.
I suppose you're right.
So I thought elephants had enormous brains, but they're also enormous things.
Dolphins have the highest brain to body weight ratio of all something.
Dolphins.
Hold on. Dolphins, yeah.
Well, dolphins are pretty freaking smart.
I want to know overall.
We have much bigger brains than dolphins, though.
Well, I'll just read you here. I don't know if this is like the master list from the top, but I'll read it. So humans at 1 to 40. Mooses. What is the plural of moose?
Moose.
Is it just moose? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Moose at also 1 to 40. Elephant fish 1 to 32. Small birds 1 to 12.
Birds.
Tree shrew. I don't know what that is. That's 1 to 10. Yeah. Tree shrew at 1 to 10. And then small ants at 1 to 7. I don't know if that's like the top, but.
Okay. So all those things have tiny brains, though.
Right. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe that's not helpful.
Yeah. I was going to say, we want something with a really big brain like us, but also not an enormous body like a whale.
Also, a tree shrew is like, looks like a little rat thing.
A shrew. Okay. Yeah. Well, I don't know. If you're back to the original question, if you put a translation device on a cat, dude, the cat's, well, we know the cat's vocabulary is obviously going to be a lot smaller, and we would be limited, I think, to some degree in our communication with it, even if there's a language translation, because the cat speaks, but obviously it does not have a whole language of vocabulary. So there's only so much it can communicate through its mouth and subsequently through its ears.
Right.
I'm sure we could communicate on its body language level to some degree, like eyes. Like they have some eye communication stuff going on. But we wouldn't be able to tail it. Tail it. So what would we be able to communicate to it through its understanding of verbal language, of auditory language? And it's just impossible to know because we don't know what a cat's saying when it's meowing. I think we can infer that it's not an entire language, but that's tough. And what level of that language processing is simply brain number crunching, and what is consciousness, if any?
And again, to reiterate the question, if capable, could it be able to explain its actions?
Yeah, could it be able? And if consciousness purpose is to create those explanations, to be able to create your perception of yourself as something greater than it is for the sake of mate value, then even then, the actions that it's actually making, just like ourselves, the explanations that it would give are not necessarily the real reason why it would be doing a thing. Right. So, but I don't even think that would be the point. You would want to just be able to talk to the thing. And that begs like I went to, is the processing of language from us something that we could do without consciousness? And I don't know. I think yeah. If someone was walking around, gosh, what would a consciousless human be like? I think it would be exactly the same as what we see and are, because we already don't make actions based on our consciousness. Our consciousness gets the sloppy seconds So
Right. Consciousness is only really at play if we stop and analyze.
right.
But if you don't, which most people don't,
They are simply
by
at the whim of whatever the brain decides to plop into their consciousness, which, you know, is how modern society works generally.
so on that note, are we much different than animals? Regular animals.
Well, as you say, we are animals, just very modern ones. And that goes to say, I don't, given the size of our brains, we just get to crunch billions of more neurons per second than pretty much every other animal. That goes to say, if someone was walking around void of consciousness, I don't think we would. I don't know if we'd know. We wouldn't. If
You'd see them as a very impulsive person. And you'd see them as
why impulsive though? Because
because
that would
they wouldn't have the ability to reason through actions. They would be acting on pure impulse.
but they would though. Reasoning is simply the brain fighting itself. One side of your brain is saying evolution has built me, this module of my brain has been built to consume as many calories as possible because that's what keeps me alive. This module of the brain is saying, but I took information that last time I ate 15 donuts, I was bedridden, and then this module is like all your what we perceive as reason is simply the brain taking in the truly infinite amount of perceptions we've had through life and fighting itself. Like your brain is not all one coherent entity that's focusing on one
Right.
thing at a time.
No, understand, but somebody devoid of a consciousness, as we've established in our parameters, is somebody that couldn't. Right, because we were just talking about conscious in this hypothetical situation. Consciousness develops as a way to.
They couldn't explain why they're doing what they're doing.
Right, that's what I'm saying. They'd be acting on pure instinct. Now, to get back to what I was talking about with the person being impulsive, their past actions could indicate or shift them in a direction to not do that, but they couldn't tell you why.
Right. They would be able to reason and just like anybody, but they wouldn't be able to tell you why they're doing something.
Right.
Presumably.
They just do it.
Right. They would just do it. Just like an animal. It would just do it.
Theoretically, yeah.
Theoretically. So a person most likely without consciousness would still have all the abilities that we have today and be able to be, a competent individual, a smart person and all these things. But presumably, given that this is maybe the evolutionary reason for the existence of consciousness, they just simply would not be able to talk about their actions in a coherent, reasonable way.
Yeah. All actions would be done. No action would not be done based on reason. Therefore impulsive. Right? You can have a learned
No,
experience.
that's not true though. No action, you said no action would not be done based on reason, but the reasoning that we're doing would still happen. They just wouldn't be conscious of it.
That's what I'm talking about.
But that's not what you said.
An articulated reasoning.
Right. They wouldn't be able to
So I sit down, right?
Reasoning.
So I want to do a thing, right? But I know that thing's bad for me. And I could sit down and I could think, well, I want to do that thing, but through these events that will take place, I can conclude that that's not the best direction for me.
They would still be doing all of that. They just wouldn't be conscious of it. Their actions, what you're doing right now is implying that consciousness can have an effect on our actions. Our actions are being made before our consciousness gets to know it by about 200 milliseconds, right? Even like I said, the reasoning that you're talking about is not your brain's neurons being fired in a different way because you're thinking about it. It's your brain's neurons firing and fighting each other, and your brain is getting to just to preview what's happening. Just because you're thinking about it, right, doesn't impact the way that it's going to end up, because your brain is, like I said, not your brain, your consciousness simply gets sloppy seconds from what your brain decides to do.
So the process of deliberation is meaningless in your example. It doesn't matter if we think things through and introduce new thoughts and ideas. Whatever was going to happen is going to happen anyway. That's your point.
That's exactly what no free will means. New information obviously is going to matter. Our brain can take in new information. Yeah. Well, if you're going to talk to me, my brain's going to take in new information.
Right. But the purpose of hashing something out, even if it's with yourself, is to think through a new set of ideas as opposed to a base level impulse. I understand that.
When you say hash something out with yourself, do you just simply mean think about it? Is that all you're saying?
Essentially, yeah. Trying to, or reasoning if you should do a certain thing or not a certain thing is what I'm talking about.
Right. Yeah. That would still happen if you have no consciousness.
I understand what you're getting at. As in, this thing. Here's where I'm getting at. And you can disagree with this. That's fine. You like to do that anyway. So I guess what I'm getting at is the conversation you have with yourself internally, or a more in-depth semblance of reasoning. I don't necessarily mean like, remember I used an example a long time ago, like if I'm going to go get Taco Bell, right? Well, yeah. I want it. It makes me feel bad. I won't go. I'm talking about something a little more in depth than that. Trying to analyze the consequences, something long-term, something
like picking a job. If you get two job offers.
I guess what I'm getting at is at some point you need there's a point that happens where you analyze new information more than a base level impulse. And this is a difficult to articulate thought.
Oh, hold on. Expand on that. What is analyzing new information more than a base level impulse? What does that mean?
Well, the term new information is a bit not correct here, but I do thing get done, right? That's a base level impulse.
Right.
My cat, right, would have a difficult time, I would imagine, having a in-depth thought process that kind of like a pros and cons weighing analysis kind of situation.
But they do that. Have you ever seen a cat trying to jump up onto something that might be a little bit too high? They hesitate, they think about it, they don't know. It's because that's their brain fighting itself. That is their reasoning. And like we just already have discussed, especially if you even just in the baby stages of meditation, it is crazily evident that you have zero control of whatever the next thought that enters your consciousness is going to be. Zero. Given that that's the case, it is 100% up to your brain, and it's fighting, 10 billion different impulses that is going to make the decision. Just because you get to see the process, quote unquote, you get to be told by your brain what's going on, does not mean just because you're thinking about it and one way or the other way, and should I take this job for $20, this job 15 hours, just because you're thinking about the two options does not mean that it is going to change whatever your brain ends up on and produces that next thought for you.
I had another point to bring up, but I don't remember where I was going to go with it.
And that process would, even if we don't have consciousness, like we see in animals can be indecisive, right? They can still not know if they should be making a decision or not. That process is still going to happen in a human that doesn't have consciousness. But they won't, because they don't have the conscious awareness of it going on, they won't be able to tell you why they made a decision over one decision over another. They won't be able to tell you why this is happening. They won't be able to tell you why they're doing what they're doing. In the same way that I would assume animals could not tell us why they're doing what they're doing, because I assume they don't have the level of consciousness that we do, or maybe none at all, whatever it is.
And the complexity of those decisions is what? Determined by the processing power of the brain? Right? Because
yeah, the complexity, as in like how many factors and what to think about and all the variables, all of that.
Because I mean,
a cat would not. Go ahead.
There are certain people with, who are potentially underdeveloped or handicapped in some way, who can't reason that far.
Yeah, it's like their consciousness is damaged on some level. Like, yeah.
Well, I mean, I'd say that's a bit of a stretch. I would say they're computationally hindered.
Like, we know they're like people's, maybe, I don't know if this could be a birth thing, but when it comes to brain damage, like people have been beaten to the point where they can't recognize faces anymore, and just basic levels of what we would identify as consciousness that they just can't get to anymore.
Yeah,
and they can't.
It's just difficult to say to a person you have a damaged consciousness. That's a bit of a. I just feel there's better ways to explain that.
Sure, we could talk about better ways to say that, but I mean, and the reality is they are not going to be what we are right now.
And the other reason I say that's a bit of a stretch is because we still can't fully articulate what consciousness is. So it's difficult to say that something's damaged when you can't fully articulate what it is to begin with.
Yes, but we can recognize when it's not working on the same level as other people's.
But just as easily, it could be something else at play, something a little more tangible.
Right, brain damage.
Right, and that's a better explanation. Doesn't matter. It doesn't.
Well, I wasn't saying they have damaged consciousness as a reason for their damagedness. I'm saying they have brain damage, which can affect consciousness, is what I was saying. Okay. But what were you going to say?
I don't remember.
Oh, sick.
I think, yeah, sick. I'm convinced by that. I know all the points that you're making.
I'll tell you what you're arguing for right now is the existence of free will. That is
right. And that's what I was just going to say. I was just going to say it goes back to the debate you and I had about free will. And now in that debate, I was representing a point that more of a like religious-ified version of free will, which I don't necessarily subscribe to.
right.
I think something in me, apart from religion, wants to acknowledge the existence of thought having power over actions. Because that's the way the world functions. It's functionally the way it works. Mm-hmm. So it's difficult to say,
that's what
well, no. Because like I said, you're trying to make a decision and this one, think it through, boom. And then somebody could come by and say, well, actually, none of that matters. And he was going to, that seems dismissive. But I understand the science. Well, I understand in the sense that I've been told and read about it. But I understand that there is science behind that. Practically, it's up in the air. And then what was the point I was driving at? We were talking about animals.
Yeah. And how they have
we were talking about
level consciousness, perhaps.
We were talking about a person without consciousness. That's what we were talking about.
Yeah, okay. That too. Yeah, if a person is void of consciousness. See, let me just paint what I think this person in society would look like.
Okay.
All the actions that they take would be exactly the same as ours. Because all the actions that we take are completely untouched by being conscious of them anyway. So having consciousness in that would not change this person's actions. It would simply change the awareness this person has of their actions. The fact that the lights are on for us, the fact that the lights are on at all, that is consciousness. They would not have that. Now, that would cause us to treat them differently because they wouldn't be able to talk about reasons why they make actions. So the fact that we're treating them differently might alter how they would exist in society. But the fact that they don't have consciousness, I don't think would have any bearing on their actions whatsoever. Because that is what the existence of no free will is.
I think it just comes into play. I think it just makes me wonder about an exact definition of consciousness. And that's
like this entire discussion is fundamental to the throwaway hypothesis that consciousness is developed for the reason of illusion and reasons for our actions, which could not be true at all. This is just a thought experiment.
Right. Yeah, okay. I think I can get behind that to an extent. I mean, the conversation of how that is in any way usable is, I mean, we've talked about that so much. The idea of determinism versus free will and the science behind it and the utility has been absolutely destroyed as far as time spent talking about it.
Oh. Well, but I don't know. I think there's utility in it that we haven't talked about. Like,
utility in what? What are you talking about?
In the belief in no free will.
I'd be interested to see. No, I don't want to get into it today. I'd be interested to see where you go with that.
How there can be utility in knowing
Yeah.
that. I think there's
No. Not how there's utility in not knowing, but how it affects how not knowing it and how that affects us, but how free will not existing affects the outcome of our decisions or lack thereof or whatever.
Well, that's not. I don't think the outcome of our decisions are going to be affected by anything whatsoever. That in regards to consciousness, I was simply saying saying that I think that there is utility in believing there is no free will. That's what I was saying.
Yeah, and I can get behind that. That's not at all what I was driving at.
Oh,
I was driving more at something we've already talked about, which is if I am making a decision because my brain is preloaded with all this information, and that's what I was saying. We've talked about that to death, and about how that's
that's in the ground, buried under 6 feet by now.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we should probably bring this to a close and let us know what you think about this, about consciousness, about its utility and why we have it, and speculation on it, as if that hasn't been talked about for the last 1,000 years plus.
Right.
So we I'll keep you posted on meditation, because I mean, who knows? I might have some breakthrough. I might become enlightened tomorrow. You never know. I might, I might come
we
back
don't
tomorrow.
Need meditation to know that.
I might come back tomorrow with no sense of self, and I find the beauty in everything around me, and yeah. We'll talk to you next week.
See ya.